welcome back to the Hilltop Pillbox here in Abbotsford, British Columbia, Canada. And today we are going to be working on a solo round of Global War Meltdown 2025. Yes, this was one that I was privileged enough to help design and playtest. And it's a favorite game of many people out there, I know that. And you may notice something different right off the bat, and that is the score tracker here, the victory point tracker. It's different than the one that maybe you have on your game board. The map that I received is one generation previous to the ones that you pick up from HBG now if you purchase the map today. So I'll show you the difference. This is the tracker that is on the maps today, which is very simple, plus 5, minus 5, and off you go. Well, this has the plus 5 and the minus 5, but it also has the nuclear authorization modifier. So before this, we took it out of the game, you had to actually get a permission from the government to fire off a nuke. So you had to roll a certain thing, and then depending on how many points you had, so the more points that you had lost, the easier it was for people to let you set off nukes. But that's been taken out of the game, and now you can just use them, but then you just simply lose a point if you do that. So if you launch a nuke here, you have lost. So we have these two tokens here. We've got the Western Alliance and the Eastern Bloc. Not precise to this game, but they will do fine. All right, so we're going to let her go here. This is a fun game that can get out of hand really quickly. Lots of stuff behind the scenes, cyber warfare, all that neat things, all those neat things that make the game very different from many other conventional warfare games, to say nothing of the little nukes that can come up and really ruin your day. All right, end of round one coming up. Right, headed into July of 2025, which is only 2 years away from what we're doing right now. And here are the current scores. So you can see the Islamic Caliphate is up $1. The Russians are up $6. India, the Pacific Coalition, is up $2. Europe is down $2. Americans are up $1, and the Chinese are up $5. So you're saying, well, how can everybody be up that much except for Europe? Well, we had some really, really good rolls, but we're going to show those to you in just a moment. We're going to start here, though, with Israel, because it's right here on the side. And yes, the Caliphate just marched right in and only lost 3 infantry taking Israel. Really simple. Even the ADM, the nuclear stockpile that was set off, only killed 1. So, over here, looking at each other across the DMZ and Korea, of course, not much is going to happen there for a while. And of course, when it does happen, it's just 1 round of combat, and in a 10-round game, it's rare that either Korea falls. But it is something that you do want to pump a little bit of money into, because if you do let it go, it can be difficult to get it back, and there are victory points under there. The Chinese were able to grab Indonesia and scoop the $5 that are there. So that was pretty nice. And they were also able to grab Japan. Now that's a pretty standard move. It was not a foregone conclusion, but they did take it. They got the exact number of hits, 3, that they needed in order to secure it. And they sank the Pacific Coalition fleet. But as you can see, the American fleet is heading over to exact some measure of revenge. But China does have their anti-ship missiles, anti-ship ballistic missiles, that are ready to fire. They can fire them out of their air bases along the coast, and they can do some damage. Although, historically, I have not had much luck with that at all. I have failed repeatedly. I went one game, I think I fired 16 of those things or something over the course of the game. And, yeah, not too good. Oh, I forgot to put the Chinese build on. Well, we'll let you see what that is in a minute. Over here, the Pacific Coalition were able to scoop Southeast Asia. That's worth $5. Otherwise, China would be up $10. But they did collect an extra 10, of course, because the Pacific Coalition went afterwards, and they were able to take that back. But because the Chinese took Indonesia, This fleet, which usually comes up and does a tussle up here to soften it up for the Americans, couldn't get through because of the strait, because China owned both sides of the strait on the combat move. So no good there. The Chinese did inherit a frigate here that these two Pacific Coalition frigates came and were able to dispatch. The Caliphate frigate was sunk, but it did take a sub with it. And yeah, pretty decent rolls there for them. Over here in Africa, the Caliphate did try to take the Eastern African states, but failed, and the Pacific Coalition was successful. And you might be asking, how are these guys getting so successful? Well, they did that diplomatic roll that allows you to lower, right? So using their cyber warfare, you can roll your dice, and if you roll a 6, and it lowers the required roll by 1. And everybody that on the western side were actually able to get some lower rolls, so they were able to scoop a lot. In fact, each one of them scooped one. So this is the one that the Pacific got. This is what the NATO faction was able to get. They got Brazil. It's an extra $4, which is nice. And then they parlayed that into an assault, because there is 2 cruise missiles here too, which they inherited, as well as a frigate. And they were able to get rid of the Russians there. And that's expensive. That's worth $3. In Panama, it's not so much. It's only worth 1. But now the Americans, they rolled and they got Mexico. So these Russians are not long for this world, I should think. But you do have to be careful, because there are airborne units in here that can travel 3. The Americans can move 4. So you do have to be careful to not leave things exposed, because they can just drop in behind enemy lines and really ruin your day that way. And if we look over here, we're going to see the Chinese build. So I bought some more anti-ship ballistic missiles, a tank, a frigate, no sorry, that's a guided missile destroyer, and an infantry. So they don't need a lot of ground units at the start, because they tend to have a plethora of them. And yeah, hopefully they can hold on while they retool. They might pull some stuff out of North Korea here. This might be a little overkill. But you want to be sure you don't lose Korea. That's tough to gain back. But here we go. Round 2. Oh, I forgot to mention the Soviets did take 9 points out of NATO. Right, Scandinavia. And they took Central Europe and took the Baltic states. And each one of them they took with authority. So there was no counterattack that could be made. But Germany has been bulked up. Now that is a juicy nuke target if I've ever seen one, as is France. So we'll see. We're going to do some math, figure out if it's a good idea. Right now, the Eastern Bloc is up 1 point, so they can kind of afford to use one and lose a point. They'd still be ahead of the West by 1 point. So we're going to think about that. They do get to go first, and Central Europe's got some nice equipment in there. Might be worth it. We'll let you know. All right, round 3, and things have heated up a little bit. No nukes yet this turn, no nukes, but as you can see, China is above where they started, so is America, and NATO is catching up. The Pacific Coalition's a little higher, Russia's a little higher, and the Caliphate is 1 higher. So everybody's doing fairly well here. Not much change over here. We fired some cruise missiles across the border, no hits. And as you can see, Israel is no longer staffed by tank battalions, but just some infantry. We'll head out here to the Pacific. Lots and lots and lots of cruise missiles shot each way. But the Americans missed on all of theirs, and the Chinese actually hit on 3 of theirs. So they took out 2 frigates, and then they also took out guided missile destroyer, because they did get a 1 on one of the dice. If you get a 1 or a 2 with a cruise missile, then you get your choice. Target select is what they call it. But I did not move the American fleet in to Chinese waters. Those anti-ship missiles, you can see them ringing the coast here. They can really bring a lot of love and affection in a bad way to your Navy. The Pacific Coalition was able to grab Sumatra here, and that's worth $1 to them, but also it opens the strait, so they're going to be able to move through next turn. Bulked up India pretty fairly with 8 new units, because that is the build limit, as you can see. And over here, the Caliphate has marshaled a lot of their forces here in Iran, Pakistan. And they are kind of looking like they might make a move in, because they can hit it with everything here, plus they can hit it with that there. Plus they got some cruise missiles they can fire in. So, well, 1 cruise missile. They only have a range of 1, and you can only fire 1 from an undamaged air base, which they have. They got some tanks and fighters that can also make it. So this might be a turn that the East decides to put the squeeze on India. There's a pink chip underneath all that. That's worth 5. I was running out of yellow chips, as you sometimes do, and for obvious reasons. There's a lot there. All right, Russia. What's going on up here in Russia? Not a lot. Kind of peaceful, actually. And even in Europe, it's pretty peaceful. And as you can see, the West was able to take back the Balkan states. Mr. Airborne here did that. Going to be dead, but hey, he had some fun. And now the Russians and the Caliphate own all of this territory here. They did hold Italy briefly, but it was taken back with a concerted joint effort of NATO and American hardware and personnel. Western Africa fell to the Chinese and their diplomacy role, and so they were able to snag a couple more fellows over here in the African continent. So only the Central African states, Madagascar, the Philippines, Mongolia, and a couple down here still exist. As you can see over here, the Russians have been booted out of Panama. An effective campaign, again, by the joint NATO-American forces. Over here, these 2 frigates came in and took shots at the subs and failed. And obviously the subs failed as well. And not much else to say. Just a lot of airlift and sea lift and whatnot going on, trying to bulk up here. I think the Soviets, the Russians might make a move on Germany this round. They can probably take it, but what will they have left? That's the concern, and their economy took some severe beatings this turn. So they will get back the Balkans, and they might go after Italy because there's some nice equipment in there. Be nice to kill, but I think now's the time to head in. Don't know if we're going to go with nukes, though. That might just open up a can of worms that they are not wanting to deal with. Now, when you fire a nuke off, if you fire it first, then you lose a point. So, whoops. The West would lose a point if that's what happened. And if the East fires it, they lose a point. So they can kind of handle it a little more easily than the West can. But then the West gets to fire back the same number of nukes that the East fired. So if they fired 1 nuke into Germany, that could have some, decent results for them. But then you look around, you see, well, what could the West hit? And of course, they could hit this stockpile here. They could also hit the Caliphate. And if they hit the Caliphate, they've got a lot of infantry to absorb a lot of hits, but that'll likely force them out of the game for quite a while, because this is the only place they can really fight right now. I suppose they can bring some stuff down through in a couple turns and maybe try to scoop some money in Africa, but there's not a lot of love there. So it's the retaliation that's a really big problem. So the East has to be very careful if they are going to open up a nuclear war. All right, so on to round 3, and it will be the East going first again, as they always do. And we'll see if they are going to prosecute a conventional or nuclear affair. Will India become a smoking crater? Time will tell. Headed into turn 4, July of 2026, and here is how the money measures up. Boy, that glare is something else, isn't it? All right. So as you can see, the Pacific Coalition is way down. You're going to see why in a second. And the Caliphate is way up for the same reason. Then we have Russia, NATO, America, and China are all close to or above where they were at the start of the game. NATO's still down a couple, but they're working on it. They're working on it. Over here, no real changes. Fired some cruise missiles at each other here. The south actually got a hit, so one less infantry in the north. And the Pacific Coalition decided to build down here in Australia. And they also built in South Korea, mainly because, yeah, they have lost India, which is a $12 touch. That is a lot of cash that just went to the Caliphate. I could have given it to China, but I figured if we can make the Caliphate a little bit richer, that might do them some good. Now, the bad part is they have to build pretty expensive items or start taking more territory because they can only build one in India. They can build they can build two there and one there, but then only one in Egypt. So that is only a grand total of 5 units they can build. So they're going to be typically high quality units. Over here, the American and the Pacific Coalition went in and shattered the Chinese Navy, but not without loss. That's it. That's all they have left. They have 6, 7, 8 fighters, and they just built the LHD with the chopper on it right there in South Korea. Oh, you can only build one thing in South Korea. So we're going to have to take that and put that somewhere else. It's going to have to go into Taiwan, I think. Yeah, got to put it in Taiwan where you can build one thing. So that is how things are going right now. Japan is still in the hands of the Chinese, although with 3 LHDs here and tons of firepower, it's likely going to fall. Up north, the Russians and the Americans continue to stare at each other across the way here. Not much really can be done. I've been bulking up Russia. I've had the American airborne snipe things from me so many times, it just gets tiring. So decided to bulk up to avoid that from occurring. What else has happened? Somalia, I think this is Somalia, yeah, it was taken by the Pacific Coalition with some American help in the air, some firepower. Yeah, that left the Eastern African states open, of course, so I'm sure that the Caliphate will send a boy in there and grab it. $2 is $2. And the Caliphate is way low on manpower now. They lost every single infantry they had, plus a few tanks, and kept a chopper. Now, I kept the chopper just for mobility and to offset any subs that might have been lurking around, but all the subs that the Pacific Coalition had went into that battle and died, so that chopper really isn't useful against the subs at this point. Typically, putting things in the water as the Eastern Bloc is a kind of a death sentence with the firepower of the American and NATO navies. Pretty substantial firepower there. China remains adamant about holding on to Western Africa, and NATO was actually able to grab Argentina, Chile, which is $2 plus a couple of boys and a frigate, so good for them. The Americans and NATO troops moved down into Venezuela, so if they can't capture that with a die roll, they will definitely be invading next turn. Over here, Germany, after being completely wiped out by the Russians, was taken back by the NATO, and with a little bit of American help, just a couple of fighters, and I think 1 infantry went in there, and they were able to take it back. Only 4 units remain, so there's a good chance that the Russians will try to take that back. But it's a good thing they actually were able to destroy the last 3 tanks with 3 of the last 4 dice they rolled. So that was a close call, because you only go for 2 rounds in any original NATO territories instead of the typical 3 rounds that you do everywhere else. Alright, so that is that. The airlift and sea lift by the Americans helped to bring a couple of boys over here to Okinawa. That'll be able to hop on to these LHDs and then hopefully take advantage of the weakened condition of the Chinese Navy here. The anti-ship ballistic missiles that they fired 4 of them, and they got 1 hit. And they took out a guided missile destroyer with that hit because it was a target select at 2 or 1. Maybe it was a 1. I think it was a 1 actually. So, all right. So that is everything. We'll be moving on to the July 2026. Not sure if this is going to go 10 rounds. We're getting pretty thinned out here, and with no nukes flying yet, I guess it's kind of anybody's game right now. The sea belongs to the west, but the land, all the land you see here, all the way up to Germany and the top of Africa, that all belongs to the east. So they definitely have the lion's share of the land and the money coming in right now. So Japan must be retaking this turn, or it just might get out of hand. We'll show you what we can in just a moment. All right, January 27, just around the corner, and we got quite the logjam here. Yeah, we've got 3 that are either 28 or 29, and 3 that are between 38 and 40. So, bit of a logjam here. We're going to walk you through it. Again, not much happening here in these territories. We've added some caliphate here. We'll show you why in a minute. And we had a couple of shots back and forth. No hits this time. But Pacific Coalition is getting a little bit of money back. They've gone out with their LHD. They were able to capture Papua New Guinea. So they're happy about that, kind of biting into the Chinese money. But the big bite came in the form of taking back Japan, yes. And it was a pretty good tilt for the West. They only actually lost 1 infantry taking Japan. So some cruise missiles did the trick in the sneak attack. The Chinese, with their anti-ship based missiles, just got 1 hit, took out a frigate. And that's about it down there. Building up, bulking up, getting ready for an invasion of some kind. They should be able to repel. There's really not a lot of stuff here for the West to bring. Lots of air power, but not much for ground units. It would be a costly invasion. The Russians continue to build up, lots and lots and lots of infantry being built all over the place. And just so you know, yes, a nuke went off in Italy. Yes, a nuke went off in Italy and took out a couple or 3 tanks and infantry and whatnot. So that cost the East some victory points. So they're down to 1 now. And so the West was able to reply in kind. And so they hit here and killed all the units that were there. I think there was only 3 actually. There were 2 tanks and 1 helicopter left after the invasion of India last round. So there wasn't much to kill, but this does block anything from moving between here and here to shore up the defenses. So all the bonus, or all the support, will have to come from China, and they can ill afford to make anything too easy to get at because of all the LHDs and air power that the West has. So I figured that was a good spot to hit. Plus, you knew that you were going to be getting some tanks, because if you hit a place like this, well, sure, you might get a 3, but then you've only killed 3 infantry. So this way we took out a couple of tanks. Now the Caliphate has a good economy right now, thanks primarily to the 12 bucks here. They're at 28 right now, so they're making some pretty good scratch. Over here we have the Caliphate losing the eastern, or pardon me, losing the eastern states. They had nagged it from India, and it was taken back. America rolled and took the Central African states, so that was pretty nice. They could use those troops to move into there. That was nicely done. And over here they had some success going into Peru, Bolivia. Peruvia, that's a neat name for a country. I think we better approach somebody about that. Up here, like I say, that nuke hit Italy, and so the hope was to take out some planes, but it didn't take out a single plane. But that did stop the West from being able to take Germany back. That's what was left at the end of the last round. So now the Germans can move more things in, land some fighters there, move some tanks in from behind that they just built. So there is a chance that Germany is going to be holding on a little longer than initially predicted, which is good for the East, of course. Germany is a very key area being a capital city and all, but also it's worth $7. And it's also a good spot for manufacturing for the NATO faction. Over here, the submarine submerged. The frigate came in to take shot and did not hit it, but there's more frigates on the way. Just need some helicopters. We've got one up here in Canada that might come out and join the party. And built some more LHDs to bring more things over to Europe and possibly take a poke at Africa and start biting into the caliphate economy, which is way stronger than it should be. Trust me, that's being up close to 30 is a little criminal. All right, that's where we are right now, heading into January of 27. So we're turning into turn 5 on the game, and so that's halfway through. So after almost halfway, it's quite a seesaw battle going back and forth. Seems as though there's a little momentum on the west side, but yeah, you can see with the points tracker, the East is still ahead just on the strength of owning Germany, India, and Israel. So they're up by 3 on that. And using the nuke, of course, dropped them down 1. And then they also lost Tokyo, so that drops them down 2. Whereas the West has had lost the 4, and now they've been able to capture back Tokyo. And they took back Germany once. So I think I've got the tracker right. I might have to go back and look at my points here. But typically what happens is if nobody uses nukes, typically they are equal numbers. So this looks right. So -2 here, +1 for the East. All right, turn 5 coming up. Should the West try a landing here? Maybe try landing up north in Siberia, because then there's a victory right there in North Yakutia. Yakutia? Yeah. My Russian is not what it used to be. All right, turn 5 coming up. Europe's going to be fun too. Well, another eventful turn here as we head into the back half of 2027. And as you can see, the money has been shifting around a little bit. This is, I think that's at 20. I'm going to have to recount them. But we're going to see what's been happening here. Again, not much going on. Oh, I forgot to actually fire that cruise missile that the Americans sent into the north. So a 3 or less. That's an 8. Kind of hard to see these ones. They look cool, but kind of hard to see at times. There we go. That's a miss. All right. Back to the action, or the review of the action. So I had brought out the landing helicopter dock here, and unfortunately I noticed we had some Chinese fighters in place. So they came down here and sank it, and then scurried back to Southeast Asia. As you can see, it's all empty up here. They have abandoned this sea zone, the Americans and the Pacific Coalition have, but they did build a couple of men in there, and they'll probably try to stock up Japan a little bit. But built another helicopter dock here, and well, guess what? The nukes flew again. The response nuke was down here in Southeast Asia, and it wiped out a couple of fighters and some tanks. So that was pretty good for the West, and they were able to capture India back. Only 1 tank remained, and I think they actually lost 1 fighter, possibly. So the Caliphate and the Chinese did quite a good job, because they were up against quite the air power, as you can see. So they took a toll on all the stuff that was brought down here. So the Caliphate will likely come in and take it again next round, and we'll show you what that all looks like in just a moment, sort of. Now this area here is going to have a little bit of change in the next round, because they sent the infantry that were here to attack and they failed, which means this is now open, which means at the end of next round, thanks to the tech called, I forgot what it's called actually, resistance, core resistance, that is unique to the Caliphate in this area here. the core resistance states that, and I'll just read it right off here. Anytime any of the faction's starting territories is enemy owned and no enemy unit is there, the faction recaptures the zone and destroy anything there. So actually it says anytime. So that's going to happen right now. And we're just going to throw another roundel on there. And I think I guess you don't have to because it's theirs. I think we may have to change the board here. So India's going to head down one and the Caliphate will head up one. I'm going to have to recheck the numbers there because that whole board got shifted. I bumped it a little too hard. Not much going on in the south here. Again, building things to move over. And Italy got nuked and 2 American fighters and a couple of infantry were killed. So they are chipping away at the air power. And I haven't built any to replace it because it's expensive. The fighters are 12. So they are chipping away at the air superiority, but you can see Germany is really hurting here. We attacked it with everything we could, and the Russians still held on. You can only do 2 rounds of combat. One more round would have done it. But unfortunately couldn't get there. So they are still holding on to Germany. But let's take a look here. You can see they are now equal because the Eastern Bloc fired a nuke because honestly, I did it because I thought if I could wipe out all of these fighters, that might turn the tide quite nicely in Russia's favor, but failed. And so that dropped us down a point here, and then of course losing India drops down another point. Meanwhile, these guys here moved up, so they're both at -1 right now. And that -1 for the West is a combination of Israel and Germany being taken, but taking Venezuela balances that out to just a -1 because they haven't been penalized for any nuke use yet. So, all right, pretty crazy stuff. China's got lots of stuff ready to go here. I'm not sure if nukes are a good idea for next round. That would knock them down to -2 points, the East, and the West is coming on strong. Lots of stuff here. But a nuke into France, again, but there's 3 infantry that could absorb 3 of the first hits, so you're not going to be getting deep into their armor. And definitely not into the Air Force. Alright, one more turn here. That'll take us to turn 6. We've had half the game so far, and I do sense a bit of a shift, but China's got lots of bucks. Could easily just pop down a navy here and start to threaten Japan again, or possibly Taiwan. Not much on Taiwan, a little bit more than Japan, but just 5 units. So with the air power that they have and their anti-ship ballistic missiles and cruise missiles, it is tough getting close to China without using nukes. So if the East doesn't use any nukes, the West can't use them without losing a point. So that might be the way to go from now on. All right, round 6 coming up. What is going to happen over here in India? Right, a new year has dawned, 2028, and we're going to tell you the events of the last year. This last year, one team really took it on the chin, and we're going to go over that right away. You can see that the Caliphate has taken a number of their forces out of Israel. It's not quite as heavily stocked. Taiwan has a new helicopter, and North and South Korea are severely depleted. Yes, they each lost 6 units. As the North Koreans decided to start a bit of a skirmish, and they each lost 6 units, and the South was able to build 1 infantry back. So, yeah, that's pretty scant resources all of a sudden. Fortunately for the South, the North's tanks and aircraft did not roll very well at all. All of those, I believe there are 10 6s that they rolled. I think they got 3 hits on those, so a little bit below the average. A couple more, and who knows? Who knows? All right. As we look out here, the Americans are building up a modest fleet on the west coast, and obviously they moved their fleet out here. I think they might have been moved out there last turn. We'll carry on. Down here, some exciting news. Yes, India was taken by the Caliphate and then taken back. Fortunately, it's the air power that's doing it for them, but they don't have a lot of resources to draw on right now. to take it back if the Caliphate decides to go in again. And that's why the Caliphate had to pull out tanks and men out of Israel, is to bulk up Central Caliphate, because they had used everything that they could reach from Iran, Pakistan, and the Central Caliphate to invade India. And they actually had 5 tanks left, but no match for the 7 aircraft that assaulted them. And they didn't roll very well either. So 1 tank remains. There were only, I think they only got 2 hits with those 5 tanks that the Caliphate had. The Russians, just a slow burn here in the east again. Not much going on. China only built 2 men down in Southeast Asia, and they are now at $71 to spend next turn. I figure that'll be enough for them to put in a fleet that will rival what can come towards them, and that might take some pressure off the Caliphate. It's a team game, folks. This game, probably more than Axis and Allies or many of the other games, this is very much a team game. No one faction can take out the other side. We know that in some games that, you know, Axis and Allies, and sometimes in 39 or 36, the Global War series from HBG, all fine games and everything, but once the Americans get in, sometimes they can bring such a punch that it sends Germany or Japan reeling. Not so much in this game. You do what you can, but it's got to be a team effort. If you don't work together, you will fail. Speaking of working together, yes, Americans came over and worked over the Caliphate. We got a couple tanks ashore here in Africa, stole a couple of bucks. And the one thing about this game that slows you down a little bit is you can't put aircraft from other countries onto your LHD, so you can't bring those units and put them on there. So it's a little tougher to get support that way. But up here, Germany fell to a concerted effort, and as we look at Europe in general, the Russians have lots of men, but that's it. Yeah, they did put a lot of money into tanks 2 turns ago, but last turn it was mostly infantry, but they also built a couple of subs, because they're tired of these guys here shucking guys from England into the battle, so they are going to head out this turn. They've got a helicopter, they got two subs, a frigate, guided missile destroyer, ready to take on the navy of NATO. We'll see how that goes for them. Beyond that, that's pretty much it. Not much was built by the Americans on this side. In fact, nothing was. It was all built on the other side. And they are looking to subdue China a little bit with its $70. 71 to be precise. A couple of technologies were researched. So we got ABM for NATO. That means that if a nuclear missile is fired at any of their territories, they have a 1 in 3 chance of shooting it down, which is kind of handy. So the Russians now can't just willy-nilly nuke the blue and expect to get away with it. And over here we got India, they have their improved drones, and right now drones have a range of 2 and add 1, and when they're improved they have a range of 4. They still only add 1 to the chosen unit, but that movement of 4 is pretty cool. That's why I was able to build them here, and they can make it all the way to India or Iran, Pakistan, or Central Caliphate to assist in any sort of a campaign that may take place. Indeed, that is quite the reach for them. So, that is where we stand here. We are 6 turns in. This is turn 7. So we got 4 rounds left to find out who will win the Meltdown that began in 2025. Should end in 2029, but might go an extra year. We'll let you know. Oh, here's the victory point tracker. After India got taken back, they are both sitting at -1. So, if the East believes that they can take back India, which I believe they can, and probably hold, they might be able to hold it. There is only one thing to kill, but they can only bring a few scant resources over, because they've only got this LHD here for the Pacific Coalition. So they can head over and pick stuff up from Taiwan and bring it back. That's going to be tough. It's going to be interesting. They've got to hold it for a turn so they can land all these fighters, but then they'll probably get nuked. In the south, I think I forgot to mention this. Of course, the Pacific Coalition was kicked out as they came over here and tried to do this. So except for the Americans that just showed up, the Caliphate and China own all of Africa. And I think I may have made an illegal move early in the game. It didn't really make much of a difference to the game itself. But I had the Americans, they had their fleet here, and they moved out. And they shouldn't have been able to in the first round because they didn't own one of these. My bad. And sometimes you make these mistakes as you play solo. Nobody's there to point out and say, hey, screw that up. But I love it when people do, because that's the best way I learn. I remember corrections people have said on my YouTube videos far more than you might imagine. So if you see something that I've done incorrectly in this game, you go ahead and you let me know. Playing solo is difficult, especially with all the steps and the 6 different factions here for each alliance. Well, 3 for each alliance, but it's a pretty involved game. All right, so heading on to turn 7. Will India hold? I don't think so. All right, we're starting over at this chart this time, and as you can see, the West is hurting for certain. They're down to -3 points, and the East is at 0, and they've also gonna have some free fun this turn. We're gonna show you why. First of all, America was able to take control Western Africa from the Chinese, so a buck is a buck, and now they're kind of free to roam a little bit here, but only 2 tanks. Caliphate built a man, and the South African Coalition, and now the North African Caliphate is open for the Islamic Caliphate to head in there and take it. Built some heavy hitters this turn because they had a lot of money to do so. And yes, China fell, but you can see it's got a India. India fell to China this time. I figured the Caliphate has had enough good paydays. The Chinese are going to need some money, and we'll show you why. Well, there's part of the reason right there. Yes, they were able to take control of South China. It was, well, it's a tough battle, but they only lost two units landing, but the Chinese only had 5 infantry defending. So as we look over here, yes, you can see it. That South Korea nuked North Korea. Look at that. Well, actually, the Americans nuked them, and ICBM came in and did some severe damage. Killed 7 units and took $7. So as we look here, though, the Americans were down to 1 fighter. That was all they had left in South Korea, and the Chinese had a ton of stuff. Well, they had 6 more tanks and 1 more man up here that they would be able to invade with. So they had to put a stop to that. There was nothing for it because they don't want to give up South Korea forever. So they decided to nuke North Korea. Yes, it was costly because now the Eastern Alliance can now nuke any zone they want with impunity. Yeah, impunity is a tough one. So we are looking at various spots as the commander of the Eastern Coalition to say, where can we nuke? Now, we don't really want to nuke South Korea. There's only 3 guys in there, and you can only nuke up to twice the level of the money. So if you roll a 6, that's all you can get. You can't get the +2 if you use an ICBM, which they probably will. And so they got to be very careful about what they're going to target. Over here, Balkan states have fallen. Yes, that was difficult. In fact, we look at Central Europe here. That was attacked. Only killed 4 men and ended up losing 6 men and 2 tanks. The Russians just shot the lights out on defense. It was terrible, and so they had to retreat. These guys are retreated. Make it official. So that was pretty tough. So there might be a nuke dropped here. Of course, the NATO powers do have anti-ballistic missile technology, but it's a 1 in 3 chance, whereas it's a 2 in 3 it'll land and destroy a whole bunch of stuff. But there is a lot of infantry there, so that might not be the wise decision. So I'm not exactly sure where to nuke as the Eastern powers, because you don't want to nuke your own soil in China, because you can take that back. You don't want to nuke South Korea. Maybe Japan. Maybe just nuke Japan. That might be a thing. not much left on Taiwan. This stuff was pulled out of there. Oh yeah, they lost a helicopter too going into South China. They pulled a helicopter off Taiwan and a boy, and so yeah, that was a costly battle. But yeah, if it makes the Chinese turn around a little bit, maybe that's worth it. Now you can see there's a lot of transports here. These LHDs. There's like 5 of them in this C zone alone. You got 2 more coming this way. So there's lots of stuff that they could drop off, but they don't have a lot of stuff to drop off. I've got a few boys out here, one guy in Papua New Guinea, a guy in Australia, but they just don't have a lot of stuff that they can drop off. So it's not really a threat at this time. Well, it'll be interesting to see what I decide to do. Might have to sleep on it and really try to figure out the best place to use a nuke and spread the most damage and get the biggest results. It's tough to use nukes when people aren't really on your soil yet in any great shape. This is the only Eastern Bloc territory besides Venezuela, which would make no sense to attack. Yeah, it's the only spot on the board where the West is sitting on Eastern territory. Huh. That tells you how good the game's going for the East. All right. Well, next thing you see will be the decision as to where the East decided to nuke the West. Stay tuned. Could be interesting. Headed into July of 2028, and the East kind of took a little bit of a beating there, but China remains strong. We're going to go through it. We had the big attack into North Korea here by a whole bunch of air power and some ground units, but only 1 round of combat and a failed cruise missile strike, and 2 Chinese jets remain. Now they don't have an awful lot that is able to get in there right now. They can only build 1. They can bring in 4 right now. So it could fall next round. We shall see though. Over here, the Chinese fleet came down here and wiped out a couple of American frigates and their LHDs to try to stop them from bringing a bunch of guys in. But unfortunately, they had 3 more down here in the South China Sea, along with the Pacific Coalition having a couple. So they were able to bring everything you see here up into South Korea. So pretty full. We built another LHD and we got a tank here. So we've got a little bit of a threat going on there as well. China took back South China. Not with ease though. They lost a couple infantry to the lone tank before they finally got a hit. And they have really bulked up East China here, as it is worth a lot, and it is a victory city, or victory point, pardon me. India remains locked under Caliphate and Chinese rule. And the Caliphate, yeah, they've got some decent strength going on here. In the last video, you probably saw there's just an American symbol there. So that actually turned Caliphate immediately. I took the $2 away from the Americans and gave 2 more to the Caliphate, because it happens whenever you notice that. So, and that is whenever an original Caliphate territory is empty, it's been conquered by the West, but is empty, it immediately reverts back. So, now there's only 5 of those on the board, so it's not a sweeping thing, but it does make you play a little bit more honestly. Over here in Africa, 2 tanks came forward, took the Central African states. They are now in range of 2 infantry and 1 tank. Not sure if that's going to actually facilitate an attack, but we shall see. Over here, we got NATO building some LHDs to get these guys here who have been trapped for a while back to Europe. And in Europe, the situation has stabilized for NATO, able to kick out the Russians out of Germany and then out of Central Europe, and with authority. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff left there. Once again, now a nuke-rich territory. Now, the Russians did use an ICBM on Germany, but thanks to ABM by NATO, they were able to shoot it down with a 3. 1 to a 4 shoots it down. The Americans have their hypersonic cruise missiles, and they cost $5 or $4, but they hit on a 4 and target select to 1 or 2. So they're doing okay there. Oh, and the Caliphate got improved drones, which might not really figure into the game too terribly much. The Americans built a couple of tanks and LHD over here. They have another LHD not doing anything, so it'll probably start doing the zip back and forth. The Russians still in charge of the Balkan states. They came in there with some tanks and infantry and lost a couple infantry doing it, so they may have to back out or just get out of Greece. Did build one guy in Greece, one guy in Turkey, and in these other regions, just trying to bulk up a little bit for the inevitable Western crush. All right, on to July of 2028. Will there be a couple of nukes used? Might be a good time to do it for the East. If you can stop all this from coming in, and if you can keep this away, because next stop Moscow, we'll see what the East decides to do. Well, the back half of 2028 was very entertaining and very radioactive, as they say. It was pretty bad. So, yes, we know that everybody got nuked. So South Korea got nuked, lost all their infantry, and then North Korea got nuked in response. But it wasn't just that. There were actually 6 nukes set off this round. 3 by the east and now 3 by the west. So we're going to show you the nukes and then we'll tell you about the rest of the turns. So the west responded by hitting Southeast Asia and hitting Iran, Pakistan. Not very effective strike here, only killing 4 infantry there and 5 infantry here. And the east hit Central Europe, and where else did they hit? Oh, and the other one they launched got intercepted. It was going into Italy, trying to wipe out all those aircraft, and it was shot down. So those were the 3 strikes: South Korea, Central Europe, and Italy. And then, of course, the West, Iran, Pakistan, Southeast Asia, and North Korea. So North Korea is now empty. Very effective strike, wiped out everything that was there, and took some money from the Chinese. China lost about $8 or $10 to nuclear strikes this turn. Meanwhile, we have the Pacific Coalition starting to nibble away at the Chinese and their economy. It took $2 from Java. So China is back under 50 here. They're at 47 now. And although the Pacific Coalition, they've lost India, which is their real meal ticket. They still have South Korea and Japan, and now collecting these little islands. They still have Taiwan worth 4, but they lost, as we know, down here in South Africa. So they're kind of hurting right now. They're kind of the uncle nobody likes to talk about at parties. So he's got to get his act together a little bit here. They don't have much punch left up here because they wiped out all their infantry. So we will see. The Chinese can only place 1 unit in North Korea and can only place the newly minted ones in Manchuria, because that was the build limit in Manchuria, right? So there's a build limit there. And then coming into North Korea, of course. So they'll only have 4 units there. Hate to say it, but they might have to nuke this again, because if they don't, they're definitely losing North Korea. They are running out of the heavy hitters, though, the ICBMs. They're down to the 4 that China has. Russia has fired all of her ICBMs. All gone. Still has some sub-launched and some nuclear cruise missiles and whatnot, but the big +2s, all they got left is this stockpile of 4, which, of course, they don't want East China being invaded, and those going away. Over here in Africa, nothing really happened here, just a little bit of bulking up by the Caliphate. I was thinking of coming down here and grabbing this, but that would just weaken here. And this is worth 2, this is worth 1, so I decided not to do that. Over here, the Balkan states were taken thanks to a couple of LHDs, bringing some boys over from South America, and the fighter planes. It only goes 2 rounds. They got 3 out of 4 hits that they needed in round 1, and finished off the 4 Russian infantry in round 2. Of course, Central Europe couldn't move anything out, but we did place 2 infantry there as a little bit of a buffer, a little bit of a meat shield going on there. The Russians took Denmark and didn't really want to pull guys off the line to fight Denmark, so they still have it, which means the NATO fleet and American fleet cannot go through the Danish Straits at this time. And that's pretty much where we are. The Russians bulking up, trying to get some armor going here and hoping to counterpunch, possibly a counterpunch into Central Europe and then nuke Germany. Don't like nuking if we don't have to, but kind of at that point in the game. And it will be tough here. They can only build one unit. China can build one unit here. That's it. And they can't move anything in because of the nuke zones. And the Russians have to be careful because if they start spraying nukes around, they're going to keep hitting these areas. And eventually this will be taken back. So got to be careful. Stirring up the hornet's nest. All right, so let's look at the points right now. This is where we are for points. -3 for the West, -1 for the East. So the East are still winning, and we are at 5, 6, we're on turn 9, so we got this turn and one more. And unless the West can find a way to get back at least one, if they can get back one city, then they'll be tied. But if the East fires off a nuke and then the West gets back one city, the West will win. So the East has to be careful. That really comes into play, firing off these nukes. Okay, round 9 coming up. Wonder who's going to own India at the end of all this. All right, heading into the last round, and a logjam at 44. Yes, there's quite a tie for the top 3 powers of the game. And then the also-rans, and we're going to show you how this all came about. Well, yes, North Korea did fall. Even with their +2 bonus in their combat and all the rest, there was only one guy there, so and he rolled a 7, so poor guy. So 1 round of combat, of course, is all you can do, but that's all it took. So yes, that is gone. And the Pacific Coalition continues to clip China's wings here down in what some people call the Money Islands. And so they have collected all the money that China was making down here. So China is now back to its what it has to start the game with, minus, of course, North Korea, but then plus India. So that's why they're still above their starting wage. Not much going on. Pacific Coalition, again, just bulking up and knowing that the West will be coming. They will likely attack the central United States here this time and hopefully gain some territory that way. But over here, this is the real story of the round, is the American and NATO forces smashed into Ukraine, Belarus, and just disposed of the Russians. Only lost 4 infantry and 1 tank, I believe. Maybe it's just infantry, actually. So, no, they also lost a tank, 1 tank. But the Russians lost a bunch of men, tanks, and a fighter, very valuable fighter, which their economy does not support anymore. And you can see there's a lot of follow-up here. So Moscow is indeed under some pressure. They do have $23, so they could build their 7 men there, of course, and try to hold out. But we're on the last round. Denmark was taken back by coalition forces there, and this side of the board is pretty void of action. So looking at the point tracker right now, the East is 2 behind, so they would have to capture and hold 2 victory cities this round in order to force another round. The only ones that they could get would be either of the Koreas, and it's not likely they would take and hold North Korea. They've only got 3 tanks, 4 or 5 tanks, and a fighter to attack that. So they could do it, but they got to do it in 1 round. So 5 tanks and a fighter. 1, 2. No, because there are 7 units there. They can only bring in 6. So they can fire a cruise missile, I guess, and try to take it that way. So that's 1 that they could get, and that would actually match them because, of course, as they gain 1, the West would lose 1. So we're going to put those back. All right, not looking really hopeful. Russia could possibly take this. They do get 3 rounds of combat, so Ukraine, Belarus, it is possible. However, the NATO follow-up would no doubt be able to unseat them and just reclaim it, tilting the balance again. And there is another option that the Caliphate does have to worry about, is that Israel and Central Caliphate are both under the gun, because there is a transport here that could bring some boys by, and a lot of aircraft that have the legs to come and attack. So as you can see here, you can go Balkan is 1, 2, hit any of these, and then could land again. Well, one of them could land here. So I guess it's not that big of a threat. But it does exist. So this is where we are, folks. So the East was doing pretty well for a while, and the West just kept trucking away at it. Just kept chipping away, and looks like they're going to have a victory. I could fire off nukes with the East here, have some fun. Then they just go auto loss. Well, not auto, but yeah. There's really no point to nuking anything, though. Because if they nuke it, they can't go in and take it. So we're just going to stick with conventional warfare here for this last round. And we'll see what happens. The West doesn't even really have to attack. So the East has really got to get going. Let's see what they can do. Is there anything that they can get back? Ukraine, Belarus, best shot. Alright, well, I decided to call it after this. The Russians had a very failed attempt here. They lost about 10 men, only killed about 4 tanks, and the tanks were absolutely anemic. I think they got like 1, 2 hits. That's it, and the NATO tanks were fighting really, really well. And over here in Korea, yeah, only got 2 hits, killed a couple of American infantry, and then ended up losing 4 tanks. So that's all that's left in Manchuria now. And yeah, that was pretty bad. That was pretty bad. So that's it, folks. We're going to give the victory to the West. Let me know what you think of the game. And let me know if I messed up any rules. Because I do know that there have been changes and maybe some adjustments. And I know this map is not the current map. I'm going to have to see if I can get my hands on the current map. I think there's only one minor change, and that is here it says you can build 2 in South Korea, and here it says you can only build 1. So we'll see how that changes on the real map. And thanks so much for watching, folks. And again, thank your friends for playing. Hug your loved ones, and just make the world a better place wherever you happen to be in it. And as always, may those dice be with you.